Welcome to another edition of The Catalyst Effect, a podcast dedicated to giving us, the entrepreneurs, the stories that we need to keep us inspired. We're getting into the behind the scenes, getting to know the persons that we admire the most, and we really are hoping to share some business tips, not some, but lots of business tips with you so that you're able to position your business and your thinking much bigger than they are right now. Today, I have the pleasure of having a chat with none other than Mr. Luke Quamina, who's seated right beside me, and we're going to get into a leadership conversation today. And if you know anything about Luke Quamina, you know he is all about leadership and thought leadership more so. So we are going to get into that conversation. Before I do, I must say thank you to the persons who have made the Catalyst Effect possible: Affordable Imports, the Rehab Center, Xpress Business Solutions, and Alpha Media Creations. It's a pleasure having you on board while we decide to impact people through the work we do. Luke, it's a pleasure.
Thanks so much for having me. Appreciate the invite, and always, where I can add value. And obviously, I know this is regional.
Yes.
And so looking forward to being able to add value to the leaders of the region.
Yes, that is what we want to do, because the Caribbean is one big home, but
Yes.
we act as if we're separate.
Yes, I always call it home. Wherever I go in the Caribbean, I'm home.
Yes.
The food is great. The people are warm. The vibes is always there. Whether we have the beaches or not, there's something else to appreciate in the space that you go. And Caribbean people, they really carry the same heart. Wherever you come to the Caribbean, I do believe you feel the warmth of the weather, but the warmth of the people. We're loving people. We're a spicy people. We have depth of culture. We love our music. And so leadership is no strange conversation to the region, because I do believe we have value to offer the world. And when people come to us, we do not want to limit ourselves just to our music, our food, our culture, but I do believe, just like we have products and services that come out of the Caribbean, we have a lot of companies, whether small to medium and even large companies, that are led by leaders. And I do believe, sometimes the Caribbean experience is what we call the brain drain.
Yes.
And people leave because the infrastructure abroad, the context is more suitable sometimes for what I may call big thinkers. But we want to create the culture here where we don't lose our talent, but they feel that they can thrive here because the infrastructure is here, the culture is here, the environment is here, the systems, the technology is here to support that type of thinking. So I'm very encouraged by the conversation today as we talk about leadership in the region, and then also specifically what we're doing in Guyana upcoming soon.
Yes. So I remember my introduction to Luke Quamina. I came to Trinidad for Vusi, and I heard this guy is going to be there. I had no clue who Luke Quamina was.
Yeah.
And I sat in the conference there, and I wasn't paying attention, I'll be very honest.
Yes.
But then you got on stage and you had the conversation, and I remembered what stood out most to me is you're coming from humble beginnings, and not because it was humble beginnings or poor, it needed to be untidy.
Right.
And that stood out to me because a lot of times I believe we think that where we are is all that we're meant to be because it's what we're exposed to.
Yeah.
But where we are is a result of the height of our thinking, the depth of our thinking.
Yeah.
So coming from that, I would want to say, what would be that conversation to somebody else who's from that poor standing right now?
Yeah.
And we're trying to encourage them to think bigger, because that's the biggest aim right now.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I tell, I more say it in youth sessions, but when you're born, you resemble your parents. But when you die, you'll resemble your choices. And what that simply means is that we all don't get to choose where we start. Nobody chooses who their parents are. Nobody chooses the zip code that they live in. Nobody chooses the size of the house that your parents, nobody got to choose their parents. Income, the economy of the home. We don't get to choose those things. But right after that, the power of our personal choices kick in. And so don't feel it's unfair how you started. The other thing I say is where you are is not who you are. So not because of the things that you see outside the window of your life right now, that's who you are. You know, somebody said it's not the water on the outside of the ship that sinks it, it's the one that gets in. And sometimes on the outside might be lack or poverty or, powerlessness or lack of education. Let that remain outside, don't let it get inside and make you think that that is who you are, because all of us can change. And I think the hope that I had in that situation is that everyone can make this choice. Choose a good model. Choose a good model. There is somebody out there who you can exemplify. Walk and look at them. They may not have your same situation, but what you have to learn in life is how to find principles. Why? Principles are universal. They can be used anywhere. Plus, they are timeless. They can be used anytime. So when I look, I don't look specifically just to what a person did, but what is the principles behind their success? Because if I can get the principle, then I could put it to use. And if I put it to use, then in one sense, I would be able to accomplish the same results. So that's what worked for me. And thank God, I was just thinking of a book title. Probably I shouldn't say it here. Next thing somebody run with the title. But The Advantage of Fathering. Fathering is a serious advantage, because I've met a lot of people, and when you don't have fathering from early, I feel it could be a disadvantage. God help you if somebody else steps in. But I do believe there's a very important role a father plays. Why? Because traditionally the father used to be provider. Now a lot of women have taken up that role. But providing is a leadership role.
Correct.
So when you're growing up and you're not seeing somebody take the role of providing in your home, your leadership philosophy is already being impacted. If you see a man on the couch every day, if you're seeing a man with a briefcase, it's being impacted. If you're seeing a man go to a business place, it's being impacted. If you're seeing a man coming back in boots, a helmet, and a coverall, it's being impacted. Nobody's giving you instruction, but your observation is teaching you something. That's what it means to be man, provider, leader, head of the home. So what happened with us is that we had a small beginning, but I had a good model in my father. I always give him credit to that. He had small beginnings, but one thing he never allowed is the smallness of our environment to affect the bigness of his faith. You could carry big faith in small environments. As a matter of fact, you could carry big dreams in small environments. You could carry big vision in small environments. Don't allow the limitations of the outside to impact the drive, the faith, the belief, the dreams that you carry on the inside. And we know we have heard a lot of stories, but I think that was my hope in the beginning, that I had a good model.
And that stood out to me because I came from those same humble beginnings. And it was, people would ask, how were you able, or when I say where I'm from Sophia. People look at me like, you're from Sophia? Yes, I'm from Sophia, and not, so in Guyana, not what we're talking about now, not the current Sophia. This is modern Sophia compared to where I came from. And my thinking has always been different. The way I see things has always been different. I was taunted about it. I'm still taunted about it to this day, but it doesn't shift my thinking, because as I've grown, I realize once I see it in my head, it's possible to come to life, because I didn't put that vision in my head. It's there for a reason. So I'm not going to allow the limitations around me. What I'm going to try to do is look at the positioning, looking at the lessons, looking at the people, and putting myself in rooms with people who are where I want to be, so I can learn from them. Because that's the tool that I will need, right? And if I continue to live in that limited space, I will remain limited and the dream will die. And I don't want to. I heard Dr. Miles Monroe in his teachings, he said, the graveyard is the richest place. And I do not want the graveyard to get my riches.
Yeah.
I want to expel. So something that I always tell people, it's choices.
Mm-hmm.
It's not where you come from.
Mm-hmm.
Because in my instance, I didn't have a role model of who I wanted to be like.
Yeah.
I definitely knew from around me what I didn't want to be like.
Yeah. Well, let me two things I want to say about the voices in your life. And it seems somehow that the people of our own household, we put their opinion on a very high pedestal. And that's understandably so. We believe that the people who carry our last name, or the people who have close titles like mother, father, brother, sister, they're sincere about who we really are. But I've learned this. And hopefully this is not your situation. But if it is your situation, I want you to hear this. People can be sincerely wrong.
Yes.
They can be sincerely wrong. Not everybody who is sincere about their perspective of you is true. They might be saying what they see, but people do not see you the way you are. They see you the way they are. What does that mean? If I carry a negative perspective about things, then you would find I will call out negativity in you and refuse to see the power of your potential. Why? Because my filter has a problem. I always tell a story of a lady looking at her neighbor and telling her husband, say, honey, look at this lady, look like her mother never taught her to wash white clothes. Look how dingy the white clothes is looking. And the husband just nods his head, and she comes out the next day and she said, that's probably really frustrating for the family. Look again, she's washing her clothes. She puts it out on the line and look at the white clothes. It looks pretty dingy. And then the third day she comes out and she say, honey, it's a miracle. Her clothes are totally clean. It's amazingly white. And then the husband looks at her and say, no, babe, I just cleaned our windows. I always tell that story because the truth is, there we are looking at a world that is dingy, not knowing that our windows, our perspective, our own thinking needed to be cleaned up. And so when you mention that, many people are held back by the opinions of people who are close to them. But I want to say many times these people are sincerely wrong. Unless you get around a believer. What do I mean a believer? Somebody, I said it takes one to know one.
Yes.
You put somebody who has that same spirit of faith or success. You put them in that scenario. And when they begin to speak or do what they do, you'll find they bring certain people alive around them. I would tell you, lend your ears to the people who speak well of your future. Lend your ears to the people who see your potential in the dark. When I go into rooms, that's who I'm looking for.
Yes.
The person who also was a non-believer just like me. Now I want to be a good model so that they will say, well, if God could do it for Luke, then probably he can do it for me. The second thing you just mentioned, so just people will say, well, you are from Sapphire, can any good thing come out of Sapphire in one sense? Yeah, good thing can come out. So you got to pay attention to the voices that you hear. But also, you do not need permission to succeed.
Correct.
What does that mean? A lot of us thinking that somebody in authority or somebody in a suit or a jacket or somebody coming out of an office or somebody coming out some fancy car say, all right, you have permission to succeed. You don't need anybody's permission to succeed. And I'll tell you, a lot of people's success is delayed because they're waiting on that permission. You have to give yourself permission today and say, listen, if this is what I see for myself and this is my vision, start today. I always say today is a good day to start. Start today and put in the work. And let me tell you something, don't wait for encouragement either. Sometimes we start and we say, well, probably this is not validated because nobody has applauded me, nobody has encouraged me. Don't expect encouragement too early. A lot of the crowd is going to show up when they see something. But you have to be your own cheerleader. You and God are a majority. You have to be a cheerleader in the beginning and say, this is what I've seen. This is what I've written down as a vision. And I'm going to get up every day, whether you have, declarations or decrees or faith statements. You speak that. You look yourself in the mirror. You encourage yourself and you get up and you say, what are the priorities of the day? Let me go to work and work on my vision, and encourage yourself until you start seeing what you've been saying.
Correct. And if you're not in a space where your language is understood, you're obviously not going to get the support because they don't speak the same language that you speak. It's like you speak Portuguese and you're in a place of English speakers. You could speak, you could scream, you could stomp, but they will not understand what you're saying because you're in a space where the language is different. Until there is translation, until the people start to learn your language, or until you get into a space where people speak your language, you're never going to be understood. And to be misunderstood is actually a powerful position. So it allows for growth. The thing about growth, I think, that I am understanding, and a lot of people have to start to understand as well, is that the deeper you get into yourself, the more you grow into your purpose, the further it pulls you away from what is not for you. It creates distance. It exposes you to things that even you sometimes are like, why am I even here? How did I get here? It's lonely. This is not familiar to me. My friends aren't the same anymore. The things I do aren't the same anymore. My family and I can't relate anymore. My language is totally different. It gets lonely.
And it's not isolation. It's that the clarification creates separation. Jim Rohn says in the beginning, we start off as wandering generalities. But as we grow, we become meaningful specifics. So in the beginning, I could be anywhere, but now I want to be somewhere. In the beginning, I could be with anyone, but now I want to be with someone. In the beginning, I could be, doing anything, but now I want to do something. So the reason we get specific is because now we understand, for us to really complete the assignments we've been put on earth, or to accomplish what your vision is, we have limited resource of energy, money, thinking, people. So you want to drive all of that into a focus, a specific area. And when things are taking from you that doesn't advance your cause, you want to remove yourself from those spaces.
Correct. So now for this conversation, we're speaking about small thinking or being poor, and translating that to growth, translating that to a space where you are now able to see more. I have my own little method to the madness as to how I'm actively applying that same drive that allowed me to reposition myself from Sophia to where I am now into business. So my question is, how does the entrepreneurs, the aspiring entrepreneurs, what is the conversation like to apply that to their business? Because I want to say it now, that entrepreneurship is a personal development plan, whether you like it or not.
It's true.
But but not a lot of people are able to shift or to marry the mindsets.
Well, the first thing is, there are some things you choose and there are some things that choose you. I always like to find out, why do people get involved in certain spaces? I think it's Simon Sinek that says your why should make you cry. If you don't have a strong why for being anywhere, when the challenges come, you're out. Because the why is what keeps you rooted and sustained in a place. The why is what keeps you fighting. The why is what gives you reason to keep growing or staying here. So I always like to ask, why did you get involved in that space? But if you've been called into this space because of a desire and a passion to make a difference, making a profit is what we used to do alone. But now you have to be there to make a difference, because those who can make a difference will make a profit, but not everybody who makes a profit is making a difference. And I think you have to be kind to the world, that if you're going to bring value to the world, make sure it adds and that it doesn't take away. But once that foundation is laid of why you're in a space like entrepreneurship or business, now the good book says desire without knowledge is not good. So to have a desire to be in a space, but not have the knowledge of the space, the reason why it is not good is that it says you will miss the mark, or you will not accomplish what you were set out to do. So married or coupled with desire needs knowledge. And I would say a lot of it will be by experience, but you also have to pursue the education of the space. And some of that comes formally. I wouldn't discredit all formal education, the things you need to know, but a lot of it comes informally through mentors.
Yes.
The shortcut to your success is the curriculum of somebody's life who has done already what you want to do.
Yes.
So that's something that I do think entrepreneurs need to do. Who's coaching you? Who's guiding you? You don't have to learn everything by experience, because you're going to run out of time. We don't have enough time to learn everything by experience. So I have to learn from another man's failures where he can say, look, this is what you do. So that's very important, where you have the knowledge in the space. And I'll tell you what I think is most important. It's not the knowledge of just what to do, but it's the knowledge of how to think.
Yes.
The thinking is, as a man thinketh, so is he. You will realize that the people who are ahead are always leading in the area of thoughts. Thought leaders, those are the ones who read the next play, can survive the next drought, can make the next change. Something I observe with coffee shops. Not everybody who is doing well in coffee is actually selling good coffee, right?
Correct.
Think about that. Coffee drinkers who are going out, they will realize, why am I spending this? But this coffee is not really good. But why is the business allowing me to be loyal to this coffee? But here's something I saw the other day, that now they're putting a kind of entertainment in some of these coffee shops. Before, just having internet, I can come, do my work, sit down, have conversations. That was good. Now, I saw where there was a sandpit in there, and remote control toys for some of the men, and stuff for the kids to come and do. People who make changes in industries and they lead trends are people who are leading with thinking. And that's where I believe the strength of mentors come in. Because to survive the trials, I have to be thinking in a certain way. It's a bigness in my thinking. It's a sustainability in my thinking, like we'll talk a little bit later on in business. Why would somebody want to be compliant? Because they understand in their thinking the sustainability of the business, system, structure, and strategies play a role in it. And if I don't have a strategy of sustainability, I could be here today and gone tomorrow. Why? Because of lack of compliance.
Yes.
So if I'm thinking right, I'll make sure to have that within the strategy, structure, and systems of my business to make sure that I remain here. So on the foundation of why I'm in a space, I would say desire without knowledge is not good, whether formal or informal. And then the consistency of practice.
Yes.
I was telling somebody the other day, I said, they're just talking about their faith. And I say, you put a lot of emphasis on the things you say. I say, but words don't hold any water in faith, even though we say we are this and we say we are that and we say we are this. I said, in all this saying, if you don't practice, people will cancel your words when they don't line up with your practice.
Yes.
You can say what you want. Lawyers can say what they want. Pastors can say what they want. Salesmen can say what they want. Doctors can say what they want. What really creates conviction is when people's practice lines up with their preaching. And in the same thing with business, I've found that the ones who are ahead found the right things to do, and they found a way to be consistent. That's why I like to study franchises. Franchises are saying, we don't give you autonomy to put the fries where you want, or make the milkshake how you want, or create the temperature you want to fry the chicken, or determine how you're going to cut the fries. We worked all that out already.
Yeah.
We have got the success formula. What we want you to do is show up every day and be consistent at the practices that has already proven to be successful. And I think for entrepreneurs, that's a challenge. They don't have the collective of successful practices. So they're feeling around this big room. It's dark. But through your mentors, that type of education can feed down to you that says, hey, don't try to figure all of this out already. Somebody has figured this out. Just like today on the set. We're not trying to figure out how to fix this camera, do our makeup, fix the mic, all of that. Somebody has figured that out. Why? Because we learn successful practices.
Yes.
And anything we do, we apply that thinking. So now we are able to create a distance ahead of us from others. Why? Because our advantage is not just our talent. It's that we have learned successful practices and we are consistent at using them.
Now, what I find a lot in the Caribbean, which is what is, well, Guyana, I'm getting to the Caribbean. What I find a lot, and which is one of the driving forces of this conference, is a lot of one-man shows. So I'm the accountant, I'm the stylist, I'm the this, I'm everything for the business. And even to some of the capacity building rooms that I've been in, and some of the experiences I've had as being able to travel around Guyana and teach entrepreneurship, in lots of those rooms, in lots of those classes, what I found myself recognizing is we are teaching people how to be self-employed and not necessarily how to be entrepreneurs.
Great point.
So one of the things that drives that is we need to shift that thinking. You're teaching me how to be self-employed. I don't want to be self-employed. I didn't resign from my job to become a full-time employee in my business. I want to build a business now. I understand that it takes some time for you to implement, test, go through certain strategies before you can actually hand over the mantle to somebody else. But we have this, and I've noticed it in the Caribbean, when I die, the business dies. That's because I was just self-employed my entire life. I never actually built a sustainable business.
Yeah.
When I'm sick, business is shut down.
Mm-hmm.
If I can't make a decision, nothing happens. And a lot of our capacity building is that we're targeting the business owner, but it's to hold them as the sole accountable person for everything without telling them that in order for you to grow, you need to release.
Yeah.
You need to set up systems.
Yeah.
You need to implement certain things that frees up your time to work on the business and step away from working in the business.
Yeah. Well, I think it's culture. So we're growing. I have the positive thinking that we're creating the culture now for a lot more entrepreneurs and small business owners. My observation is that most people who got into business never studied business. They had a drive, they had a desire, they always had these ideas perking around their head, and they just went for it with faith. So they start with desire. I think what we have to do, and just like this conference, is that we're coming besides them to serve them, to create the template and the infrastructure to protect them. Because a lot of times when people hear anything like compliance, they think law and they think fair.
Yes.
Rather, they need to think growth. Without these structures, without these systems, without this strategy and approach, what you're doing and you love to do, it won't survive. There are threats against the success and the growth. And now we're here with our competence to serve you. We're coming beside you to give legs to your journey, legacy. We're coming to make sure this is an inheritance for children to come. If you study most of the family businesses that have gone into billions of dollars, these are families with a vision. Along the years, they built the infrastructure of business, for example, like the Waltons.
Yes.
And it's years and years now, and generations that they created wealth for their families. They could have only done that with the strategy of part of it being compliance and how to structure this thing to outlast me. And I think that's what people need to hear. This is not a fair tactic. This is a growth move.
Correct.
I'm putting something in place to make sure that my growth is sustained. I'm working with financial institutions in the right way to make sure that when I develop this relationship, they can help me. And we have to teach the right thing and not to fear these institutions, but to show that they're there for service. And I think what you're doing bridges the gap, because a lot of times, some of these people who have started businesses, they may not have the education, and sometimes the language confuses them. It's above their heads. And so they're afraid because they don't understand it. Somebody needs to come and bridge the gap and say, okay, let me put this in layman terms to the farmer or to the person who's just doing something out of their home, and they had a home kitchen and then they wanted to go on the side of the road and sell food and stuff, and say, let me make sure that this thing is in place, protect what you're doing, give sustainability to it, and put a structure in place to help this last for years, so that one day when you're ready to put up your feet, it can still be earning, it can still be profitable, and it can still be protected. in years to come. So I feel hopeful about it, because movements like what you're doing needs to be supported. But I'll tell you something, the good book says, he that keepeth the law is happy. And we need to have a stronger culture of the law being felt.
Yes.
When the law is slack, all kind of practices happen. The law does not need to feel like a burden, but it needs to have presence and swiftness.
Correct.
So when the law is slack, you find that people's practices fall outside of the lane of where they should be, because the law is not being swift in making feel. That's a part of culture too.
Correct.
So we can't do this alone as well. There are other aspects of governance that need to be present. For example, when you look at just putting up a house anywhere, and you look at a lot of the Caribbean islands, when you fly over with a plane, where I always remember when you fly into the US, you see order, urban development, there's planning, the streets, the avenues. It looked like somebody thought this thing out from.
Yes.
But a lot of times when you fly over a lot of the islands, somebody like a hill, and they're on the hill now. They're building on the hill. They're inviting people on the hill. They're having friends come over on the hill. The truth is, the law is slack. There's no governance. There's no planning. And then money has to be spent by the government to get lights, water, and infrastructure to this person.
Mm-hmm.
And we curse out governments for saying that we don't have this. But a lot of times, people are running businesses and they have not gone through the right procedures. So we ourselves also have to watch ourselves in the mirror and say to ourselves, hey, compliance is a good thing because it's kind to others. The same resources that are coming in limited ways to government to try and serve the entire nation, we also can make sure those resources are well spent by following the right procedures.
Right, and compliance, I marry it with the charity begins at home. Compliance begins at home, because when we complain at a government level that, the country is corrupt, who encourages the corruption? Mm-hmm. It's not if you're blaming a government, it's not the government alone. Mm-hmm. Who goes into the agencies and pays a fine thing to get something done? Is that the government, or is that you, the citizen?
Yeah, practice.
Right?
Yeah.
So compliance starts at home, and it starts with what you encourage.
Yes.
It starts with what you practice. I found myself, when I first started doing my consultancy, because I understood how the system works, I would find a staff at the agencies and I'd say, I'll give you a little something on top of your salary, just handle certain things. And one day it was like, Natasha, what are you doing? You are a part of the problem that you complain about. So now I was like, okay, we need to do this the right way. What did I first do? I implemented a policy, an anti-bribery, anti-corruption policy in my one-man show business. That means that I set a rule that prevents me, even if I want to do it.
Yeah.
There is a rule in my company that now says I cannot do it. So I need to hold myself accountable to that. Because if I continue, I'm no better than the people or the others. So we need to change the way compliance starts with you. It starts at home.
John C. Maxwell, right? Leadership coach and really a mentor of mine. He said one time they asked him to write a book on business ethics. And he responded and he said, no.
There's no such thing as business ethics.
He said, there's no such thing as business ethics. And what he was really trying to say, the business to have ethics, it's people.
Yeah.
It's either that person has ethics or they don't. And when that person gets involved in the business, then we want to say, well, this business has ethics. It's either the people have ethics or they don't. Now, which takes us to a further conversation on a personal level about values.
Yes.
Because the business is experiencing the expression of your personal values.
Correct.
So when we talk about compliance in business, we're asking people to be compliant. We're asking people to hold to the values of integrity and walking according to the law. Yes. That's what we're really asking. And if the person themselves does not want to hold to this, then we can't really point fingers at the business. It's really people behind that are driving these businesses, and it comes right back down to leadership. And leadership begins with you as an entrepreneur by yourself. You are a leader, and when you bring other people on board, you are the foundation for that culture, and they will follow what you set. And
Correct.
that's why leaders are very important. John C. Maxwell says, everything rises and falls based on leadership.
It does. So recently I understand the value of empowering and training your staff. So we're in conversations right now with somebody to do ongoing training with my team. I want my team to be the best, because the better they are, the less headaches I will have. Right? The more confident I'll be in the growth of my business, because one thing I had to accept in my kind of business, I cannot do everything. I have to have the right people in the
Teamwork.
right places, building the business, and I have to have people who are smarter than me, who are able to hold me accountable, people who scare me as well. Because if they can scare me, then I will...
They're competent in what they do.
Correct. So I asked the gentleman, I said, I want my entire staff to be exposed to leadership training and customer experience. And he paused for a minute. It's like, because I understand that leadership is not a title.
Right. Right.
So if they all can think like leaders, my company will be amazing.
Of course, the development of leaders. So tell me, where did the desire come for putting out the value of teaching really businesses about being compliant as it speaks to what is upcoming in Guyana? Where did that come from?
It came from me recognizing that we have amazing potential in Guyana, in the Caribbean. We have seen unprecedented growth as a result of our oil. But what I saw is trying to get clients for the international client, trying to get staffing for them, trying to get business for them, trying to get a contractor or an electrician. It was like looking for a needle in a haystack, because these investors from the foreign lands come in understanding standards and looking for a particular type of business to do business with, not person, but business. Now the chances of finding those businesses that actually on paper are following protocol, have systems set up, have their taxes and ducks in a row, were very hard. And I said, you know what, this is actually going to push us out of our own markets. If we don't start to do business the right way, if we don't start to implement the right systems, then we're not going to be able to compete in our own country. And we're going to have the narrative like almost everybody else that, oh, these people came into our country and took it over. No, you failed to prepare yourself to capitalize on the opportunities that are coming to our country.
Yeah. Well, that's very powerful. I understand the vision of that. And so really what you're doing is you're serving the wider population for their preparedness. You know, I observe certain countries, for example, like when you think of the UAE, and certain places that have open invitations for people to come there and to work or to even, take up citizenship.
Yes.
Their systems are in place.
Yes.
And that's one of the very first things that they have put very easily. How to come and establish yourself, not just as citizens, but how to do business and how to put things in place. So if anybody's looking on, really, the value here is basically you're having their backs.
Yes.
To make sure that they can meet the standards, come up to the standard of excellence and compliance, which now puts them on the map to get big business, because these companies, they have what they're looking for as standards. And if you're not there on paper, then you're missing opportunities because you don't have this infrastructure in place. And then also, I think this would also encourage, because the culture also has to support that.
Correct.
Because some people say, I could get the job without that if I could go around it. But if the culture stands up, which I've seen in some of the efforts to say, no, this is not how this can be rewarded if there's no compliance, then you leave people no option but to put things in place. So I think it's a balance. One is the growth aspect,
yes,
but also we also have to have the consequence aspect, where people are now held accountability. Unless you do it this way, then you cannot operate and function in business. And I think one of the things we wanted to do, as far as a master class, in the aspect of leadership, why I think that is important is what's taking place with many companies across the board is wiring the culture to operate not just in this way of compliance, but in the way of excellence where we can move together. Because I think for many leaders and managers, how to motivate the workforce is very challenging today.
Yes.
Right? Multi-generational, the different values that are there. People's loyalty to companies have changed.
Yes.
The knowledge worker is on the rise. Globalization, options, the things that people are doing, the lack of focus, distraction in the workplace because of certain things with technology. So, Eric Hoffer said, in times of change, learners inherit the earth, while the learned is beautifully equipped for a world that no longer exists. And one of the things I've seen in my training, company-wide, regional-wide, is that change is not just happening, change is happening at a speed.
Yes.
And so what's happening with organizations, if you're learning too slow, then there's a gap that is created between your learning and the speed of change outside of your organization. So organizations are challenged to become what I call learning organizations, but you got to learn at a speed. And I think what has to happen is the upskilling and retooling of your workforce. It cannot be event-based anymore.
Yes.
Like you said, training development has to become a part of the culture. And you have to now be very deliberate about investing in your people's growth. You can't grow a company, but you could grow the people in the company, and the people in the company can now grow the organization or grow the business. So that's the pressure with leaders anymore. Offering sometimes people a raise is not even getting them to do more work. Why? The culture is toxic.
Yeah.
So even more money to stay where I don't like, it doesn't feel good, it's not inspiring. People are not even taking more. They rather leave for their peace than stay and earn more, and they don't feel good in that space anymore. So I guess also it's not an option for people to work on organizational culture. It's a must now, because that's the driving force of how we actually produce results in the workplace. And so I'm really excited about that, because outside of compliance, I think leaders has to come into this space of understanding how to really get the workforce in that optimum place of performance.
Yes, so I am super excited for that masterclass, because it is a thing. It is necessary for the human resource. That is your most important resource. We spend millions on technology, on uniforms, on everything else, and the human resource is sitting there wasting away, dreaded, because all they do is routine, and the routine is not healthy for them, in a space as well where now mental health is becoming super important in the workplace, because a dynamic workplace will have effects on your mental health. What kind of culture am I creating that my staff know that we have their back if they have ours? Right? Am I truly empowering them, or is my ego too big?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because I need to trust these people that I hired. I need to create an environment where they feel empowered. As a medium-sized entrepreneur, I want to be able to sleep and not be startled when I jump up, like, what just happened? Why can I do that? Because I trust my team. My team, I've invested in them. They know what to do. And bigger than that, they understand what we all working towards, which is the vision. They understand how their part adds up to the bigger picture.
Yeah.
And a lot of companies, I'm sure, don't even share their vision. It's kept as top secret.
Yeah.
It's not shared with your staff, and they're the ones who actually have to help you
Yeah.
achieve that vision.
Yeah.
But they don't know what they're working on.
And I'll tell you this, Tash, I know we can't do everything, because we have to leave some for them when we go down.
For sure.
But what I've noticed now, you gotta have a plan for development of leadership on every level of the organization, right down to the operation.
Yes.
No longer can organizations just have the typical meeting of the executives at top, where we say this is where leadership begins and ends, and not think of who's leading in the team that's taking care of this building. There's a leader there.
Correct.
Who's leading in accounts? who's leading in marketing, who's leading in HR. You got to think leadership there. They're not just departments. Because one of the things I notice when I go in is that the top always thinks they're fully informed of what's happening. And I always go into meetings and I say, you know this meeting right here? After this meeting, there's going to be a meeting. Everybody starts laughing. I say, you know the meeting after the meeting, where everybody talks about how the meeting went? I say, that meeting is usually loaded with a lot of truth. And I say, when I come in to train, I don't always get the truth. I say, but the meeting after this meeting, there'll be a lot of truth. I said, I'm asking you to let's turn this meeting to the meeting after the meeting. I said, and most of the times when people are open and vulnerable, what I've noticed is that leaders really don't understand. Sometimes they're the last to find out certain things. When you strategically develop leaders at all levels, then you close the gap of feedback, which allows us to make the necessary changes.
Yes.
Because something could be dying on a certain level of your organization. You don't know until it starts to stink. Now when you're getting involved, you didn't realize this thing has been building up for a while, but we have not touched base with the leader of that department because they're not in the big meetings. Yes. So even the things that happen at the very top, those people in that room have to come and work the org structure right down to make sure they're in touch with what's happening. That's one of the things I'm looking and excited to do, to teach really people how to take the year and create what I call a leadership development environment and a learning organizational culture to move everybody along. Just like you said, leadership begins with self-mastery. You don't need anybody to be following you. You need to be worth following.
Yes.
And develop people in the organization that sees themselves and take ownership for the space. So pretty excited about that, the event that will come up where we really help to serve. And I know it's not a one-off. I would always recommend, pulsing on things at least once a quarter to really get it, solidified in the culture that this is a space and a group and a team of leaders that's here to serve.
Yes, so this really is an introduction of you to Guyana and the way that you think and changing that culture, because it plays hand in hand, compliance and leadership. You can't be a leader if you aren't compliant.
Mm-hmm.
And leadership, again, it is not a title.
Mm-hmm.
It's more of an attitude.
Mm-hmm.
It's more of how you operate in that space. It's a mindset,
Mm-hmm.
right? So we're introducing this because it is something that I see that we need. And we need to shift in order for the businesses to truly grow.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that as you come down, that we'll be seeing you in Guyana a whole lot more after the conference.
I'm looking forward to
well,
it. Now, I want to say,
because companies need that.
both profit and non-profit needs to be in the room.
Yes.
Right?
And I have the crazy idea that even our government needs it. Any government needs it, because they lead an entire country all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Your ministers need it. The PSs need it because they're leading dynamic growth of organizations in Guyana. And ministries are businesses too.
Yeah.
The government is running a mega business. It's a country.
Yeah.
So they need
the door is wide
exposure
open
as well. It is wide open for the culture to shift, because if we're going to grow sustainably, if we're going to transform Guyana into a Dubai, not a Nigeria, then we need to implement the systems for the human resource to truly capitalize and shift the way we do things so that we can actually become a Dubai rather than a Nigeria.
Yeah. Well, I tell people, instead of trying to be the best in the world, be the best to the world.
Yes.
And when you have that concept, it means you're looking at what you do, and you want to show up as the best version of Guyana that Guyana could possibly show up as. And I think every island needs to see themselves of that. If it's Trinidad, let's be the best Trinidad to the world that the world has ever experienced. So I'm excited. 2025 has really started off quickly, but it's all around value. So I'm excited to be back in Guyana, in this space. And if you're looking on, welcome, show up. Meet us in the room. I'm looking forward to meet business leaders of the church, government, those in small and medium, even large-scale businesses, and be able to bring some of this training and this value to companies there. I'm already working with some of the multi-regional companies who has base in Guyana, So in that term, I will be, doing a lot more training, and so I'm super excited. Ghana is home.
Yes, and we're super excited to have Luke at Regulations and Beyond on March 27th at the Pegasus Corporate Suites. You come and you will be fulfilled. I did promise you that I want every participant to leave with a headache, but the good kind of headache, because we are doing it differently. The morning sessions will have the conversations, and the afternoon sessions we have back-to-back workshops. So you are going to be exposed to HR policies, you're going to be to the legal policies, to governance, to accounting systems, all in one day. And Xpress has something amazing that we will also be launching on that day to give you continued capacity building that is necessary for you to not just be exposed to it, but to continue and eventually change the way you do business and change the way you do think. I want people to think bigger, as big as possible, and to achieve and outdo yourselves. And let's start to see franchises coming out of the Caribbean and entering regional and international spaces. That's the hope. We want to be able to pick up our companies and transform them into another space, and not always have international companies come into our land, but we want to enter their lands as well.
Yes.
We need compliance to do that.
Yeah. Well, Tash, thanks for having me on. It's been super excited. Information so far, and it gives me a greater sense of the journey ahead, the task at hand, and how we could continue to add value to those in Ghana and beyond.
Thank you so much, Luke. And thank you for watching another episode of The Catalyst Effect. This is our Trinidad edition. Yes, we have two versions of The Catalyst Effect. We will be doing Trinidad and we will be doing Guyana. Why? Because we're one big melting pot and we want to expose everybody to the business industry. It's better to learn from the people near and far, because you never know who has the message that you need to hear. So thank you to our sponsors, Affordable Imports Trinidad, Xpress Business Solutions, Alpha Media Creations, the Rehab Center, for making this possible. I'm your host, Natasha Waddle, and it was a pleasure. Remember to like, follow, and subscribe to our channels, and you can listen to our podcast on any of the major streaming platforms.